All students, we have discussed till now various topics on GST aspects of input tax credit, starting from the basics. Then we came up till understanding in the previous sessions on various provisions of registration, e-way bill, e-invoicing, right? So today we will discuss on the other topics, which is very relevant for you, which is payment of taxes, what is TDS and TCS provisions, and also the provisions finally on the returns. Okay, how do you file the returns? Because ultimately, whatever you do the studies here, you have to file the returns. That's when you will start learning it. So that is where we will teach you on what are the various types of returns and how do you file them. So that this knowledge will help you to practically apply for it, because the returns also gets updated on a most relevant basis. It gets updated every 1 or 2 months. So that's why the returns also gets updated. But the basic what we lay down in these sessions will help you in the actual practical world. So this is a very practical session. I would say that this gives you the base or gives you the theory to implement the practical aspects. One more update is today's session. You will be able to watch it only on YouTube. So any in on your groups, you could just mention that you will not be able to ask questions on BOS app. Neither you will be able to access the Zoom link. You can access it through YouTube. So any of you who are knowing people that they want to watch the classes but they're not able to log into Zoom classes, please communicate to them that these classes are live on YouTube. Due to a shift, a transition in the technical aspect of the usage of Zoom, these classes are not available on Zoom only for today, and they're available on YouTube now. Okay. I know I can see that there are a few students who are watching the live sessions on the YouTube. I can see them. So we are good to go then. So today's topic are three topics which we will cover. We will cover on payment of taxes. Then we will cover on the topic of TDS and TCS. And then finally on the topic of returns. Okay. So we'll start with the topic on payment under GST. So we'll have some background. We know that what is CGST? CGST stands for Central Goods and Service Tax. That is, whenever you make any intrastate supply, you charge CGST 50% and you charge SGST 50%, which is SGST is State Goods and Service Tax. So it goes to the state government. And when it is union territory, it goes to the respective union territory. So when you do an intrastate supply within a state, you charge CGST and SGST. And when you make an intra-state supply in a union territory, then you charge CGST and UTGST. Okay. So you charge CGST and UTGST. So CGST in both the cases, whether it's a state or union territory, CGST goes to the central government, and SGST in case of a state goes to the state government, and in case of union territory tax, it goes to the union territory government. That is ultimately goes to the central government, but allocation happens to that union territory. Okay. And when you make this intra-state supply, you charge 50% CGST, 50% SGST. And when it is UTGST, you charge 50% CGST and 50% UTGST. That is in case of a intra-state or a intra-union territory. But if it is from one state to another state, when it is an import, when it's an export, when it is a transaction from one state to another union territory, or from one union territory to another union territory, or from one union territory to another state, then they are called as intrastate transactions, interstate transactions. Sorry, it is called as interstate transactions, and you will charge IGST, which is a integrated goods and service tax that also goes to the central government. Okay, so in terms of revenue to the government, when we make any sales, one of this revenue goes to the respective governments. That is at the point of sale transactions. But government also has other streams of revenue, which is TDS payments. When I supply something to my customer, who's a organized customer, who is a customer who is notified. So if it goes to such notified person, they will deduct TDS and pay it to me. And that TDS also, till it comes to my account, the deductor who deducts this, he will have to deposit to the kitty of the central government or state government, and balance, once it goes there, then the government will give me the TDS credit. So initially, when the TDS has to be deducted, that has to be deducted and paid to the government's account. So we can say that CGST also goes to the government, SGST also goes to the government, IGST also flows to the government, TDS also flows to the government, and also TCS. Because once the other person deducts it, he cannot keep it with him. He will have to give it to a government account, and then government will transfer to the respective persons. So TDS deduction happens by the, say, TDS happens by a government organization. So TDS, who is supposed to deduct? A government entity. When I supply something to a government organization, that is a central government or state government, they will have to deduct a TDS and remit that to the, again, the on the GST portal. From the GST portal, you will also mention the GST number on whose supply you have deducted it. So then the CGST, the portal will give that credit to me. Okay. Why this happens? To have a control on the transaction, this circle has to happen. Similarly, TDS, TCS payment, a typical case of TCS payment happens when I supply something to the, e-commerce operator. When I supply something to the e-commerce operator, they will deduct TCS, that is called as tax collection outsource. So that is also collected by the e-commerce operator and remitted to the government. So TDS, TCS are the deductions which happens, goes to the government. So we can say all of this is what goes to the government account. And then interest, penalty, fees, and other payments. These are the things which happens. Interest, penalty, fees, and other payments. These are the payments which happens, and this also goes to the government account itself. Okay. So these are the various revenue sources which a government gets it. Okay. Now, we understood that we have to take registration in the previous session. Once I've taken registration, then what happens? There are three ledgers which get opens up against your registration number. You don't have to file any application or make an application saying that please give me these ledgers. No. Once you are registered, आपके registration करने के बाद आपके GST पोर्टल में आपका लॉगिन और पासवर्ड मिल जाएगा, और आप जब लॉगिन और पासवर्ड डालेंगे तब आपको ऑटोमेटिकली वहां पे तीन लेजर्स दिखेंगे. Once you are registered and you got your login ID and password, you have to log into the GST portal. Once you log into the GST portal, you get three ledgers. What are those three ledgers? Electronic credit ledger, electronic cash ledger, and electronic liability register. So first is electronic credit ledger. Okay, this is the first one. Second is the electronic cash ledger. And third is the electronic liability register. So these three, by default, it will open up once you get your registration. Why? Because all the transaction has to get recorded for your GSTIN number. So the government opens up these three ledgers for you. Got it? Now what happens? In our electronic ledgers, one is which is prepared and updated by the taxpayer. How is this prepared and updated? Should I have my books of accounts ledger and one ledger on the GST portal? An extra headache? No. You have to maintain your books. And how is this maintained? Then why am I saying that it is prepared and updated by the taxpayer? I am saying this because once you file your returns, your monthly returns, your quarterly returns, your annual returns, when you file it, whichever is the return relevant for you, you file that return, then these ledger numbers get updated. Okay. Once you file your return and claim the input tax credit, we have read the topic of input tax credit. You have to satisfy all the conditions of section 16, and then the credit is taken in GSTR 3B return. Right. Today, I will not ask you any questions because even if I ask you questions, I can't see your answers. Okay. So you are relieved today that you're not, I'm not asking you any questions. So it is just a relaxation day today for you, but pay attention and pay concentration, because I may not make you a dialogue situation, but I will make it a monologue. But still, if you pay attention, this will help you in your exams. Okay. So What is electronic credit ledger? Is once I file my GSTR 3B return, in my GSTR 3B return, I will mention what is the credit which I am availing. Once I mention that in my returns, that amount comes and appears in my electronic credit ledger. So that's why this is prepared and updated by the taxpayer, because if I file my return, then this electronic credit ledger will pop up. If I do not file my return, then this does not pop up. So that's why it is said that this is a return which is updated by the taxpayer. And then you have a bank account similar to our bank account, how we maintain bank balance in our bank account. There is a electronic cash ledger. Think of electronic cash ledger equivalent to as your electronic cash ledger is equivalent to your bank balance. Okay. So when you open up a bank account, some amount you will deposit, right? Similarly, any amount which you feel there is a liability and you have to pay it, you will deposit that money in your electronic cash ledger. Why? Because when I file the returns, I don't have to pay taxes that time itself. I can deposit it before also, so that it will be in the government's kitty, but it is allocated against me. Like how I deposit my cash of say of some amount in my bank account. So is that my balance? Yes, but who is holding it? The banker is holding it. Similarly, electronic cash ledger is my cash, what I'm depositing in my cash ledger. It is held by the government, but it is my money. So exactly like a bank account, bank, if it's a saving account, the bank gives you interest, that in case of an electronic cash ledger, government will not give you any interest. Okay. But think of it like a current account. Like if I have a current account and I deposit some money, there is no interest payable. Similarly, electronic cash ledger, once I deposit some amount there, it is there. I can utilize for making any liability payments. But if I deposit too much, don't expect any interest on it, because there's no interest which is payable on the balance in your electronic cash ledger. On credit ledger, can I claim get interest? No. Even on your credits, you don't get any interest. Okay. So these two are prepared and updated by the taxpayer by his actions. Once you deposit, this gets updated. And once you file your returns, this electronic credit ledger gets updated. And then once you file your returns, this is the third return which is prepared and updated on the basis of returns, which is your electronic liability register. Now, what happens in an electronic liability register once you file your returns? Huh? Once you file your returns, you have a column called output tax. You have a column called tax payable on reverse charge basis. Okay. What is that? They are all your liabilities, which means that is you have to pay that amount to the government. Correct. So they are called as electronic liability register. That is whatever liability is payable by you, that gets updated in your electronic liability register. And that is one way of updating the electronic liability register. Other way is, one is this liability register, which gets updated by the returns what I file. And other way of updating this is when I update my taxes are there, and there is a adjudication, or popularly called as assessment. When the officer does any assessment, he will determine the liability. That liability also gets populated in my electronic liability register. Okay, so there are two ways of updating the electronic liability register. One is by filing the returns, and another way is when the officer determines the liability, and that is my liability which I have to pay. That also gets populated in this electronic liability register. These are the sections which we will cover: payment of tax, interest, penalty, and other amounts, maintenance of the electronic ledgers, which we have discussed now. How do you utilize the ITC? What is the order of utilization of ITC? Interest on delayed payment of taxes. This is very important topic, because I think section 50, there are so many changes, the related rules to it. So 50, you can expect some question from this. Interest on delayed payment of taxes. Circumstances on which TDS becomes mandatory. Circumstances when TCS becomes mandatory. Transfer of input tax credit and transfer of certain amounts. So these are the overall scheme of things which we will study under this topic of payment of taxes. Liability on supply is determined in the monthly returns, and this monthly returns, when the GST got started, the monthly returns used to be GSTR 1, 2, 3. I mean, that was the scheme which they thought of. But GSTR 1 came in, GSTR 2 did not born, and GSTR 3 did not born. So they have an alternative called GSTR 3B. So presently we have GSTR 3B itself as the monthly returns. Okay. So you have to file the monthly returns to GSTR 3B. Liability, whatever liability is there, we don't pay that completely in cash. We can pay partly in cash and pay partly from the electronic credit ledger. The provisions of CGST Act, if you see, it has quite many sections, 174 sections, but IGST has hardly 30-40 sections. Why is that low? Because all the provisions of CGST are there. So they don't have to copy and replicate it in the IGST Act. That's why there is one section called Section 20 of the IGST Act, which makes that the provisions of CGST Act in relation to registration, returns, refunds, adjudication, assessment, whatever is applicable in CGST will be applicable to the IGST also. That is the reason that the provisions of CGST are made applicable to IGST. That's why the number of sections in IGST are less. Okay, that doesn't mean one act is more powerful than the other. Each act is powerful in its own way. It borrows most of the sections, so it doesn't replicate it, doesn't repeat it. But IGST Act is a very good act as well. Now, the rules and the ledgers. Rule 85 says that how a electronic liability register has to be maintained, or how it is maintained by the portal. Then Rule 86 says how a electronic credit ledger is maintained, and Rule 87 says how a electronic cash ledger is maintained. These are the various provisions which is applicable for the various registers and various ledgers. So as I said, each taxpayer wise, this electronic ledgers are maintained. Okay. For each of your logins, you will have your separate ledgers. Tax liability register, which has the liabilities in the form of what is your tax liability, what is your interest fees. ऐसा नहीं कि सबको bundled करके एक कर दिया है. They need to have a bifurcation of what is tax, what is interest, what is fees, and what is penalty. Okay, so in firstly you will have major heads. You will have CGST, SGST, IGST. That is the main tax heads, correct? Because you need to have how much you need to know in your liability registers or cash ledgers or credit ledger, how much is the amount towards what is it? Because CGST, SGST, and IGST, all the three payments are different. So, firstly, you will have imagine like a tree diagram. First, you will have electronic liability register. Below that, three trees, three branches. First will be CGST, second will be SGST, third will be IGST. Within CGST, you will have breakup of tax, interest, fees, penalty. Similarly, SGST and IGST, you will have tax, interest, fees, penalty. Why this minor head? So major head is called as CGST, SGST, and IGST. Minor head is all this bifurcation. Why? Because a tax is a tax. It cannot be offset with the interest. If the demand comes for you to make the payment of interest, you have to make payment of interest itself. You cannot make the payment of tax. So to identify and make this bifurcation, you have this minor heads. Okay. Tax liability register will reflect the total liability of a taxpayer after netting off for a particular month. That is, from your returns, whatever is your output, less your input, the net amount will appear in your electronic liability register. Second is your ITC ledger, which is your input tax credit as self-assessed in your monthly returns, will reflect in this ITC register. The credit in this ledger can be used to make payment of tax only and not any other amounts. Very important. Now you know your liability. Now the assets or the benefits what you have is from whatever liability is there, you can utilize either the cash ledger or your credit ledger. So first we'll discuss the credit ledger. The electronic credit ledger is also called as ITC ledger. Now, from the ITC ledger, what all can we make the payment? We can make the payment of only the tax amount. Okay. Suppose when I file the return and there is a liability. Okay. now there is a liability of tax and liability of interest also. Why interest? Because I have filed my return late. The due date of the return is 20th. I have filed it on the 25th. So for 5 days delay, I have to pay interest. Correct? So 1 lakh is my tax amount and 500 is my interest amount. And in my electronic credit ledger, I have 1,10,000 rupees. Can I utilize this 1,10,000 rupees for payment of this 1,05,000 rupees? No. Why? Because this electronic credit ledger can be used to make payment of tax only. And my tax, and my example is 1 lakh rupees. So 1,10,000 जो credit balance है, उसमें से I can utilize only 1 lakh rupees for payment of tax. 5,000 rupees, I cannot utilize this electronic credit ledger. I have to make this payment of 5,000 from my electronic cash ledger only. So cash ledger से ही मैं 5,000 pay कर सकता हूँ. Clear? And so ITC register or electronic credit ledger can be utilized for payment of only the tax amount. Okay. It and not amounts such as interest, penalties, and fees. I cannot utilize the electronic credit ledger. Okay. And the cash ledger is my bank account. Bank account मेरा है तो मैं किसी के लिए भी पे कर सकता हूँ. Correct. So similarly, bank account, whatever is the cash ledger, I can utilize that for payment of any TDS, any TCS, any tax, any interest penalty, anything can be used for making payment from the cash ledger. The cash ledger is like a universal ledger. It can be utilized for making payment of any amount. पेनाल्टी, फाइन्स, कुछ भी पे करना है आप कैश लेजर को यूज कर सकते हो. As I said, maintenance of these ledgers will be on the each taxpayer wise. Now, how do you make payment of tax? Payment of tax will be through electronic cash ledger and electronic credit ledger. What will all the credits happen from the cash ledger is any payment you make, like a challan gets generated और उस चालान से आप अपने बैंक से पेमेंट करोगे, that will get as a credit to your electronic cash ledger. And any TDS and TCS which is deducted by your customers, by your e-commerce operators, those TDS and TCS amounts also gets added up to your electronic cash ledger. So cash ledger के तीन source हैं. One is you make the payment. You can make payment through your bank account, cash account, debit card, credit card, various modes, but everything is your payment. So you are making payment that gets added to your electronic cash ledger. And second is the TDS, which is deducted by the government that gets added to your electronic cash ledger, and TCS, which is collected by the e-commerce operator, that also gets added up to your electronic cash ledger. So that is your credits. And debits will be for making payment of tax, interest, penalty, fees, or any other amount, because that's a electronic cash ledger. Okay. Now, electronic credit ledger. तो ये हो गया आपका इलेक्ट्रॉनिक कैश लेजर. नाउ अभी इलेक्ट्रॉनिक क्रेडिट लेजर. This, what credit will come here? The returns. Okay, what we have discussed, that itself I'm depicting in a separate diagram. कि आपने जो returns file किया है, the credits, what you checked the GST or 2B, then you disclose that amount in your 3B. That is what comes here. The input tax credit on your self-assessed basis comes and sits in the credit, and the debit will be from your electronic credit ledger only the output tax under this law or the IGST law. That is your output tax, what is payable, only that gets debited, or you can utilize your electronic credit ledger only for that purpose and nothing else. Just give me 1 minute. Yes, sorry. So we were discussing on what is the credit ledger, what is the cash ledger, what can come and sit there as an asset, and where does the amount go. It's like a flow. Something gets added. Once it is added, then it goes. So correct. So like in a bank account, if you give check to somebody, can they withdraw it? They can withdraw it, but you should have sufficient balance. Like that, in this credit ledger and cash ledger, you should have sufficient balance from either your actions, and then it can be utilized for making any payments. Clear? Next is your electronic cash ledger. What is the electronic cash ledger has been summarized here. Okay. Electronic cash ledger is a summary of all deposits or payments made by a taxpayer, treated like a bank account. Date of credit is on the receipt of CIN, Challan Identification Number from the collecting banker. That is, you have made payments from your bank account, but the date of credit will not be when it is gone from your bank account. It will be the date when it is gone into the government's account. Sometimes there could be a technical glitch and the payment would have got stuck. तो आपने तो पेमेंट आज कर दिया, गवर्नमेंट के अकाउंट में कल आ रहा है. So then the date of credit in your cash ledger is when it goes and sits in the government's account. That will be the date of credit in the electronic cash ledger. And date of credit, that is date of credit, exactly it's explained here. Date of credit in the treasury of the state government or central government is deemed to be the date of debit in the electronic cash ledger and not the actual date of deposit. क्योंकि आपने तो बैंक में deposit कर दिया है, बैंक ने भी उनको दे दिया है, but that has to reach to the government accounts digitally. I mean, we don't have to physically give it definitely, but online when the transfer happens, when it sits in their balance, once it comes to their government's account, then I mean it does happen seamlessly. I've never seen a case where that I've given it, I've filed the filed the challan, I've made the challan and it has not come. But this is the way it happens, that once it goes to the government account, that is then it is called as date of credit. Okay, this we know, right? Payments to be made for any intrastate supply, tax to be paid as CGST and SGST. If it is a state, if it is a union territory, CGST and UTGST. For interstate supply, tax to be paid as IGST. Certain categories of registered person will be required to pay to the government account, TDS and TCS. In addition, interest, penalty, fees, and other payments are to be made. This is what we have discussed. This is fine. Modes of payment. Modes of payment is okay. Through internet banking or using a credit card. How can you make the payment? आपको इलेक्ट्रॉनिक कैश लेजर में आप पैसे कैसे जमा कर सकते हैं? थ्रू इंटरनेट बैंकिंग, through using your credit card or debit card, using a unified payment interface, that is UPI, unified payment interface, or immediate payment services, immediate IMPS services, that is from your bank account you can make the IMPS or log in through your internet banking, or using a credit card or debit card are the most popular mode of. There will be a scanner. Once you click on that, once you click on challan and you select the option of UPI, a QR code will appear. You can scan it and make payment through UPI as well. Clear? So online mode is one, and most of the payment modes will happen through online. Offline is when online का मतलब क्या है कि आपने कंप्यूटर बैठे बैठे ही कर दिया through the online mode. Offline mode is when you will go to a banker and give a check. That becomes a offline mode. That also happens through multiple modes. One is through NEFT and RTGS, which means that you will go to the portal, select the amount, how much you have to deposit, select the categories, then you will select the option called NEFT or RTGS. Now, what is this NEFT and RTGS? If you would have done any bank transactions, you will see that आपको फंड ट्रांसफर करना है एक अकाउंट से दूसरे अकाउंट के. You can do it through net banking, or if you're not having a net banking password and things, you can go to the banker and say that I want to do a NEFT. So they will do a fund transfer from your account to another account. It will happen in a couple of hours, 2 to 3 hours. RTGS and NEFT is almost the same. NEFT has some limit. RTGS does not have a limit. So that's the only difference. So even when you want to make a payment to the GST, you can enter the details on the portal, mention the amount and things, select the option of NEFT and RTGS, then a challan gets generated. You download the challan, take a print, and give that to the banker and say, I want to make a NEFT for this payment. And you give the check, they will accept it, and they will do the fund transfer from your bank account to the government's account. So that's an offline process, because online to instantly ho jata hai. Offline is you have to go to the banker, and then they will do the NEFT or RTGS. That is option number one for offline payments. Another payment option is over the counter. That is, you are not doing any NEFT or RTGS. You're going to the banker and saying, I want to make deposit to the government account against my GSTI number. Because every time you register yourself on the doing the registration, then you will get a unique number that is called as GST identification number. So with that number, you can go to the banker and tell that I want to deposit cash my GSTI number. So they will do it, but there is a limit. जैसे online में there is no limit. In offline through NEFT and RTGS, there is no limit. And but over the counter, there is a limit. That is, there is a limit of up to 10,000 rupees per challan per tax period. So when you want to make the payment without NEFT and RTGS, you want to make payment through cash or to check or demand draft, then there is a limit of 10,000 rupees. 10,000 के ज़्यादा आप over the counter transaction नहीं कर सकते हो. Okay? But in certain situations, they have relaxed this limit of 10,000 rupees. That is in case where the deposit is to be made by government departments. Now, government departments generally will not have cash, but some government departments, if they have a tax collection through cash, right, and they have to pay GST to the government. So for government departments, they've given a relaxation that this limit of 10,000 will not apply. आपको लाख रुपए 2 लाख रुपए जमा करना है government account में, so then they can do. But the question may come up, GST itself is a government, so who else will deposit to the government? GST is a separate government. Like within government, you have Ministry of Finance, Ministry of HR, Ministry of Rural Development, Ministry of Roads, Ministry of Railways. So each of these, like railways, take an example of railways. Railways collects GST on air tickets, on flight tickets. Okay, on flight tickets, they collect the GST. Now they have to remit it. Okay, even though railways is run by a government, they don't get any exemption because on the railway tickets they collect the GST. So they will collect that GST and pay it to the GST account, right? So there they may have a lot of cash collections. So there they have been given example. I'm giving you like that multiple governments entities will be there wherein they collect the taxes and they can deposit to the bank account in cash. There is no limit for them. So first is deposit can be made by government departments over the counter above the value of 10,000. Then second option is proper officer or any other officer who is authorized to recover outstanding dues from any person, whether registered or unregistered, including recovery made through attachment proceedings or sale of movable or immovable property. Which means a proper officer has gone for inspection, he's gone for search, जैसे छापा मारने जाते हैं, right? So search and seizure, he's gone. And during that time, he found a lot of cash. And he is determined that there is a tax payable by the person. ऐसा नहीं कि cash मिलने पे पूरा cash जमा करना है. Cash also can be held, but if any tax is payable by that person, right? If any tax is recoverable by that person and any recovery is made through attachment proceedings or sale of movable property, they have done an auction and they've got a sale of property and the buyer has paid the money in cash. So that cash can be deposited against his GST number on the portal. So only when the proper officer authorizes is that, then the limit can exceed. Second, again, when the proper officer or any other officer for the amounts collected by way of cash, check, or demand draft during any investigation and enforcement. So first is recovery proceedings when they have done. Second is any investigation and enforcement proceedings they have done. That time also they can deposit the amount in the bank account for an amount exceeding 10,000 also. So these are the exceptional cases where the proper officer has been given the power to deposit the cash more than 10,000 rupees. And fourth scenario is deposit to be made by persons notified by the commissioner. Commissioner ने notify कर दिया कि कुछ trade business ऐसा है जिनके पास cash transaction ज्यादा है, then they can deposit to the government account in cash. In such cases, it can be. Okay, so only in these four cases, the payment of taxes can happen in cash about 10,000 rupees. What is challan? Challan is, so now what do we understand here? What is the modes of payment? Online and offline. Offline, there is a limit for over the counter. For NEFT and RTGS, there's no limit. Now, how do you make the payment? To make the payment through challan on the GST portal, you'll go and select the option called payment of tax. Okay. Once you select the option of payment of tax, then once you mention all your details, then a challan common portal identification number gets generated. Now, who can generate this common portal identification number? It can be paid by taxpayer, his authorized representative, departmental officer, or any other person paying tax on behalf of the taxpayer. मतलब आपको पे करना है टैक्स, आप आपके जीएसटी लॉगिन से कर सकते हो. Correct? I can definitely do it because it is my GST login. Now, if I am not able to generate, if can somebody else generate for me? Yes, there is an authorized representative option that if you're giving your authorization to a tax practitioner, right? Then the tax practitioner can mention your GSTIN number and generate challan for you. So you can generate it. Your authorized representative can generate it. During any search or seizure, the proper officer can generate the challan. That is during enforcement, he can generate the challan. That's the third option. And any other person paying tax on behalf of the taxpayer. That is in case of auction. Okay, my assets are getting auctioned by an auctioneer. That auctioneer can generate the challan instead of me. Okay, because he's doing the auction and he has to pay the taxes, but it has to be from my account. Correct. So the auctioneer or the agent can make the payment from my GST. Then certain key details of challan like name, address, email, GSTN of the taxpayer to be auto-populated. That is, once you mention your GSTIN number, the name, address, and email ID will get auto-populated. How will it get auto-populated? At the time of registration, I would have given these details. So those details will get auto-populated. And important aspect of challan is a challan one challan can be used for making major heads and minor heads. So once you go to the GST portal, you select payment of taxes, select what category of tax you want to pay, CGST, SGST, IGST. Within CGST, you will have minor heads, tax, interest, penalties, or fees. Similarly, under two heads also. So you have four categories. Firstly, CGST, SGST, IGST, and cess. That is also one component. So you'll have four components as major heads and minor heads. So you can, it's not that for CGST separate challan, SGST separate challan. In one challan, you can make payment of multiple heads. Okay. Then the validity period of a challan is 15 days. That is, once you put the details, it will be valid for 15 days. After 15 days, it gets lapsed. मतलब आपने चालान जनरेट कर दिया, पेमेंट आपको करने में कुछ टाइम चाहिए, you need some time to make the payment. Yes, take some time. You have a period of 15 days to make the payment of challan once you have generated it. So you get 15 days time period to make the payment of the challan which is generated. So the challan, what I mentioned, the major head and minor head, it will get saved in the GST portal for 15 days. Okay. Challan would not have a jurisdiction location code. So it does not have the tax period. It does not have the jurisdiction location code. Nothing. Just mention your GSTI number. That is sufficient. Now, how will an unregistered person or a CTP or NRTP pay? They will pay. Why should an unregistered person pay? Suppose there is a liability which is payable and he's not registered. Now he wants to pay because officer has found out that he's made a sale and he has convinced him, see boss, you have cheated the government, you have made sales and you have not registered. Now make the payment. Okay, sir, I will pay, but how do I pay? I don't have my GST registration. So the officer can give him a GST registration, or the officer doesn't believe him. By the time I give you registration, I cannot catch you. So they will give a TIN, temporary identification number. They will say, we have generated a temporary identification number for you. In that temporary identification number, log in and pay. So such unregistered person will make the payment of tax through temporary identification number. That I understood. Now, why for a CTP and NRTP? What is a CTP? CTP is a casual taxable person, and NRTP is a non-resident taxable person. So, a casual taxable person or a non-resident taxable person, they also have to make payment of GST. So, how will a CTP and NRTP pay? They want to take registration, right? So, why should they pay through a temporary identification number? Just think over this. Why should they make payment through temporary identification number then? They are there to register. They are ready to register, no? They are ready to register, but we know that a CTP and NRTP has to take registration in advance, right? Before they start the business, 5 days before for their actual business, they have to take the registration. And to grant them registration, the rule is they have to make the deposit of the estimated taxes. Now, how will they deposit? Because the registration happens after they make the deposit. So the point of time is before registration, they have to make the payment of advance tax. So that advance tax they will pay through this temporary identification number. So they will make the payment through the temporary identification number, show the officer, see boss, I have made the payment. Now you please issue me the registration certificate. So once the officer sees that the amount is made payment through this temporary identification number, then okay, amount is deposited. Now I will give the registration. So the temporary identification number amount will get as a deposit in their normal registration. So since there is a procedure that first they have to make the payment, then they will be issued a registration for the CTP or NRTP. For that purpose, they will make the payment through a temporary identification number. Then that gets added to their normal registration. Basic payment is challan can be edited before finalization. कि आपने कर दिया enter, you want to edit it, you can edit it. And system, generally there was a time of payment. Now it is 24 hours. Now it is seamless. So I don't think this condition is anymore available that you have to make from 0 to 8 hours, nothing like that. System of electronic cash ledger on GSTN for each taxpayer. CIN gets generated on successful payment. First CPIN comes, then CIN comes in. If CIN doesn't get generated, then the person will make a representation through the portal saying that I have made the payment, Baba, but my challan is not getting generated. So you can file this form called GST PMT07, and that's like a query saying that boss, I have made the payment, and the payment cell of the portal will look into it and they will generate your challan. Sometimes it happens, right? We make the payment and suddenly the bank account gets closed, everything gets closed. So you don't have to worry. You will have the CPIN number. From the CPIN number, you say that I have made the payment, amount has got debited from my bank account. but the challan identification number is not generated. Please help me. That you can make a request through TMT07 and it will be rectified. If banks fail to communicate challan details, electronic cash ledger may be updated on the basis of e-scroll of the RBI. That is, at the back end, whatever payment we make, that gets updated in the RBI account because we are making payment through bank, most of the payments, and banks will maintain a e-scroll. From that e-scroll, it will be confirmed that payment is made and challan will be generated in GST PMT06. What is PMT06? That is the challan. The challan ka number jo hai, that is GST PMT06. Now, how does the amounts get utilized in the GST? The one is the major head, that is the IGST, CGST, and SGST. So you have major heads, that is IGST, CGST, SGST, UTGST, or CES. These are called as the major heads. Okay. Amount available under major head cannot be offset with another. If you have made the payment under IGST, but you wanted to make the payment under CGST, can you adjust it? Generally, no. Similarly, once you go under IGST, you will have minor heads. Under IGST, if you go, you will have tax, you will have interest, you will have penalty, you will have fees, and you will have others. So similarly, imagine the branches coming from each major head and having the sub branches. Okay. So each major head will have 5 minor heads. Also, if I have to make the payment under tax, it cannot be utilized for interest. If I made payment under penalty, it cannot be utilized for fees because the liability what is created will be created under the subheads. So correct head has to be classified. But if I made the payment under tax, mistakenly instead of making the payment under penalty, is there any way to rectify it? Till 2020, there was no way that if you made payment of tax instead of penalty, you had to make the payment of penalty again and utilize the tax for somewhere in the future. But from 1st January 2020, that is from 17 to 20, there was no option. But from 1st January 2020, Rule 49.9 permits that through Form PMT09, you can rectify that you had to make payment of tax, but the amount was paid under PMT under penalty. You will file on PMT09 saying that transfer the amount to penalty to tax. That will happen. So you have to make an extra effort of filing additional form called as PMT09. So if you file the PMT09 and tell what is the wrong minor category shifted to the correct category, it will happen. But can this PMT09 payment of penalty of GST to penalty? Yes, that is also possible. From any minor head to any minor head within the same major head, or from one minor head of a major to another minor of the another major can happen. Cross transaction also can happen. So once you make the payment, try to make the payment under correct head. By mistake, if it is gone under the correct head, under the wrong head, it can be transferred through PMT09 through the correct head. Okay, that's possible. So, but doesn't mean that you make all the payment under one head and then do the transfer. It unnecessarily is a waste of time. So make the payment under the correct head. By mistake, if it has gone to the wrong head, it can be corrected and the correction can happen through PMT09. There will not be any officer's consent or anything which is required. It will be self-assessed because cash ledger is like a bank account. You can transfer from one account to another account in your bank. Similarly, in your electronic cash ledger also, it can be transferred from one account to another account. Now, PMT09, we discussed, it can be used for two things. A registered person can transfer an amount from one major head or minor head to another major or minor head in the electronic cash ledger. That is first. That is your own registration, you can do it, or transfer any amount available in the electronic cash ledger to electronic cash ledger for IGST or CGST of a distinct person. Please understand this. There are two options. We know what's a distinct person. That is, I am registered here and another person, that is my branch office, right, is having another registration. So that branch is called as a distinct person. I can transfer the amount what is there in my electronic cash ledger to my branch ledger, provided I can transfer only IGST and CGST. I cannot transfer SGST. So I can transfer only IGST and CGST. And there should not be unpaid liability in my liability register. ऐसा नहीं कि मेरे liability में 1 लाख है और मेरे कैश लेजर में 50,000 है, मैं 50,000 उसको ट्रांसफर कर दूं। पहले अपना तो liability पे कर लो। So your liability ledger should be clear. There should not be any unpaid liability and the cash is lying extra with you. Then you can transfer it to a distinct person. वरना distinct person को transfer कर दिया और आपका liability कैसे पकड़ेंगे? So you should have your liability ledger cleared. Only then you can transfer CGST and IGST to a distinct person. How will this transfer happen? Same PMT09. PMT09 can be utilized for this or it can be utilized for this. Either transfer by yourself or transfer to your distinct person. When does the payment happen? Payment of taxes, the due date is generally 20th, and for some states, it is on the 22nd. If you're filing monthly returns, 20th or 22nd. Various terms in payment, CPIN, that is once you generate the challan, a CPIN is generated, and once you make the payment, then that CPIN will be, CPIN is normally 14 digit, then that 14 will become 17 once the payment is cleared. So from CPIN, it gets converted to CIN, and you will have a BRN number, which is bank reference number, and EFPB is the electronic focal point branch number. That is through which bank you're making payment. They will have a reference number that is called as EFPB number. GSTN will transfer this workflow. I will explain you through chart. First, taxpayer will go to GST none. That is, you will go to your GST portal. That is the first point. From the GSTN number, you will mention the details and generate the e-challan, which is called as CPIN. Because आप यहाँ पे जब enter करते हो, that CPIN आता है, right? That CPIN comes here. From the CPIN, you will make the payment. How? You will choose the payment, whether net banking, credit card, debit card, or various options, NEFT, RTGS, UPI, whichever mode you select, you will select that mode and then you will make the payment. After you make the payment, that CPIN gets generated as CIN by the e-focal point branch. Okay. Once this happens, then this e-focal point branch will give the data to the GSTN, because all this transaction is happening outside GSTN. Going and interacting with your bank, putting your login ID password, generating the OTP and making the payment happens outside. So the data has to come back here, right? It happens very fast. For us to understand itself, it's taking some couple of seconds. But once you go to the GSTN, it happens fastly. So these are all things which happens really fastly and seamlessly. So taxpayer will go to the GSTN, he will generate the CPIN, wahan se he'll make the payment, and then a CIN gets generated. That CIN, the banker will give it back to the GSTN, and from the GSTN, it will go to your credit taxpayer's ledger. So GSTN will reflect that amount in your electronic cash ledger. That's how the background works. Rules for utilization in credit ledger, this we have discussed. Cash ledger can be used for making anything and everything. Credit ledger can be used for making only payment of tax. So when we say tax, can I say that reverse charge also is my tax and you can utilize this? No. Credit ledger cannot be utilized for making payment of reverse charge mechanism. So tax means only your output tax. So any output tax which is payable, that can be utilized, that can be paid through your credit ledger. Payment of your reverse charge tax, that is tax on reverse charge mechanism, you cannot utilize your cash to make the payment of your reverse charge transaction. ओके, तो आरसीएम के लिए आपको इलेक्ट्रॉनिक कैश लेजर ही यूटिलाइज करना पड़ेगा. इफ यू हैव सफिशिएंट क्रेडिट, यू कैनॉट यूटिलाइज दैट फॉर मेकिंग पेमेंट ऑफ एनी एनी रिवर्स चार्ज लायबिलिटी. And electronic credit ledger, that's the thing, that's the same reputation. Now, in your electronic credit ledger, you've got the credit. Now, how will you utilize this credit? I'll show you the flow chart first. You will have the IGST credit. आपने IGST purchase interstate purchase किया है, so you will get IGST credit. This IGST credit has to be utilized first. You cannot say, I will utilize CGST, then I'll come to IGST. You have to utilize and exhaust your IGST completely. For what? For making payment of IGST liability first, like with the like-minded. So IGST credit can be utilized for making payment of IGST, and then it can be utilized for making payment of CGST and SGST in any proportion. So IGST credit utilized for making payment of IGST payment, then utilized towards payment of CGST and SGST. Next, CGST credit utilized for making payment of CGST, then with IGST. Okay? So first IGST, utilize it against IGST liability. So this is all credits. This is all credits. This is all liabilities. Okay, the center term is your credits and this is your liabilities. Okay. And similarly, SGST, ITC credit, you will make it to utilize towards SGST liability, then towards your IGST liability. So what do we understand here? IGST को तो आप IGST और C और S में यूज कर सकते हो. CGST को आप C और I में यूज कर सकते हो. S को आप S और I में यूज कर सकते हो. लेकिन CGST का ITC you cannot utilize towards payment of SGST. और SGST का credit you cannot utilize for payment of CGST. This is not possible. Clear? CGST और SGST क्रॉस यूटिलाइजेशन नहीं हो सकता है. Okay? That's what is explained in the previous slide also here, that there is a rule, because whatever I'm saying is a simplified version of the various rules here. IGST, IGST shall be utilized towards IGST and then utilized towards CGST, SGST or UTGST in any proportion. ITC of IGST should be completely exhausted. ये चार्ट आपके स्टडी मटेरियल में है, इसलिए ये समझा रहा हूँ. IGST, ITC of IGST has to be completely exhausted mandatorily. Then CGST shall be utilized towards CGST fully and then utilized towards IGST. Similarly, SGST का ITC you will utilize towards your SGST liability fully, then utilize towards IGST. Hope clear है अभी? Common points for electronic cash ledger is when a refund is claimed, because in some cases you can claim a refund. That is, if you're making any inverted duty structure supplies, you're making supplies to a SEZ or making export supplies, you can claim refund of it. So when a refund is claimed, the refund amount needs to be debited to the extent of refund claim. When I apply for refund, that much amount has to get blocked. So that much amount will be debited, and refund to the extent which gets rejected. I've applied for a refund of 1 lakh. The officer said, no, 20,000 is disallowed. I'll give you a refund of 80,000. So I have debited 1 lakh rupees, because the first point says that when I apply for refund, it will get debited to the extent of 1 lakh rupees, right? And when I get 80,000 rupees to my bank account, the balance 20,000 will get recredited to my electronic cash ledger or electronic credit ledger. ठीक है, ऐसा नहीं कि रिफंड में आपको कम मिला तो आपका लॉस हो गया, लॉस नहीं होगा. You will get the refund in your bank account. Balance will come to that respective ledger itself. Now there is a rule called as Rule 86A, which says that आपका credit block हो जाएगा. That is, when the commissioner or an officer who authorized by him is empowered to impose any restriction. So a commissioner or an officer of a rank, at least of an assistant commissioner rank, they are being authorized uh, to empower another officer to impose restriction on utilization of ITC available in the electronic credit ledger if he has reasons to believe that such ITC has been fraudulently availed. अगर उनको पता चलता है कि आपका ITC आपने fraudulently avail किया है, then there will be restrictions, and such restrictions can be imposed in the following circumstances. That is, ITC has been availed on the basis of tax invoice or valid documents. Documents correct hai, but the person who is issuing it, he is not existent, or he is not conducting the business, or without receipt of goods, you have got the credit. सेक्शन 16 में कंडीशन है कि ना कि आपको गुड्स रिसीव होना है. यू हैव नॉट रिसीव द गुड्स बट यू हैव गॉट द क्रेडिट, और द टैक्स इन रिलेशन टू विच हैज नॉट बीन पेड टू द गवर्नमेंट. दैट इज, he has filed his GSTR1, it is appearing in your GSTR2B, but he's not filed GSTR3B, which means he's made a supply but he's not paid the payment to the government. In such situation, your credit can be restricted. How? By the officer saying that he will review the supplier's details and he will come to know that you have claimed the credit of such a nature, of these three natures, then your credit can get blocked. Or the registered person availing ITC is not in possession of a tax invoice. तो क्या होगा? आपका क्रेडिट लेजर लॉक कर दिया जाएगा, because you have claimed the credit but not in a correct manner. You should have done all the due diligence. That is, the supplier should have paid the taxes to the government. He should have actually supplied it. Now, without doing that, he's given you the credit. So that supplier's mistake. The government is saying that you are getting the benefit of this. So what will happen if the officer finds out through proper modes that this has happened? Then they will restrict your credit, and this restriction will not be permanent restriction. It will be restricted for a period of 1 year from the date of imposing such restriction. That is, अगर आज आपका credit को restrict किया है, तो 1 year तक आप utilize नहीं कर सकते हो. After 1 year, it will get opened up. क्यों? क्योंकि business चला नहीं सकते हैं. So they cannot give a permanent blockage. They will give a temporary blockage here. Okay, so there will be a temporary blockage that your electronic credit ledger will get locked for 1 year if the officer, which officer, commissioner or any officer above the rank of assistant commissioner finds out that you have claimed fraudulent credit, wrong credit, then your credit ledger can get blocked. Okay. That is Rule 86A, which is a very powerful rule. Practically, people are scared of this, saying that if the officer finds out, then my credit itself will get blocked. So it's a very dangerous thing. So the person who's claiming the credit has to ensure that he is taking the credit from the right person. Common points, this we have discussed. Now we'll go to electronic liability register. This will reflect the total tax liability जो आपने returns में liability decide किया है. How will you decide the liability? On whatever is my sale, that is my output. Output minus input is my net liability. This net liability will appear in my electronic liability register. Okay, only output payable will not come here because output minus input will come in my electronic liability register. Then the amount of tax, interest, penalty, or any other amount payable which is decided by the officer, that also comes here. As I said, electronic liability register will be of two parts. One is return-based electronic liability. One is officer-determined liability. Both of that will come in my electronic liability register. Now, there's very important rules shall be applicable, which is whatever, which liability should you pay? There is an old liability and there is a new liability. Which liability should you pay first? Any self-assessed tax other than dues related to returns of the previous tax periods. So any liability pertaining to previous returns. आपने जुलाई का रिटर्न फाइल नहीं किया है और आप अगस्त का फाइल करना चाहते हो, Can it be possible? No. Your July returns has to be filed and paid. That is, your old liability has to be paid. Only then you can pay the current tax period. So the rule or the flow of liability payment is any self-assessed tax of the previous tax periods has to be paid first. Then any self-assessed tax related to return of the current tax period has to be paid second, and then any other liability of any demands raised under 73 or 74 has to be paid. तो ऐसा नहीं कि 73 74 लाइबिलिटी आ गया तो आप रिटर्न फाइल नहीं करोगे। आपका रिटर्न में जो भी लाइबिलिटी है उसको आपको पे करना है, पुराने रिटर्न्स का, फिर इस मंथ के रिटर्न्स का, फिर आपके पास जो भी लाइबिलिटी ऑफिसर डिसाइड करता है वो पे करेंगे आप। सो दैट इज द फ्लो थ्रू विच यू हैव टू पे योर लाइबिलिटीज। So this is another way to find a correlation between electronic credit ledger, cash ledger, and liability register. So electronic credit ledger पहले आएगा. In this you will have all your credits, that is your input tax credits, which is assessed on your self-assessed basis. आपके रेगुलर जीएसटी और पीबी में आपने जो क्रेडिट किया है वो इलेक्ट्रॉनिक क्रेडिट लेजर के क्रेडिट में आ जाएगा. डेबिट विल बी फॉर पेमेंट ऑफ ऑल द लाइबिलिटीज. फिर इलेक्ट्रॉनिक कैश लेजर विल बी क्रेडिट ऑफ पेमेंट मेड थ्रू वेरियस मोड्स and TDS and TCS. Same what you have discussed, I am giving you a revision here. Whatever payment I made will be a credit here. Then debit will be payment of all the liabilities and any other payments. This payment, what we make, right, will go as a credit here because again it's like a trial balance, right? Debit and credit has to match. वैसे ही यहाँ पे भी debit will be amount payable will be the debit and credit will be from this what I make the payment that will be credited, so it gets offset. ठीक है? From your cash ledger, you can make payment of TDS, TCS, RCM liability, any amount payable under Section 10, that is under composition scheme, any interest, penalty, fees, all of that can be made the payment here. But credit ledger say only payment of the liabilities, that is output tax payable is what you can make the payment. Fine. And any amount remaining in cash ledger can be claimed as a refund. जैसे आपके बैंक में आप बैलेंस डालते हो, अगर आपको पैसे चाहिए तो आप विड्रॉ करते हो ना, वैसे ही इलेक्ट्रॉनिक कैश लेजर में आपने ज्यादा पे कर दिया है, यू कैन क्लेम अ रिफंड ऑफ इट, बट यू कैन नॉट डू दैट इन योर क्रेडिट लेजर. क्रेडिट लेजर का रिफंड कैन बी क्लेम ओनली इन थ्री सिचुएशंस: एक्सपोर्टर, SEZ, or a person who is having a inverted duty rate of structure. Only these three persons can claim a refund, others cannot claim it. When I close my business, can I claim it? No, still you cannot claim it. Your credit will be in your credit. If you close your business, also you cannot claim a refund of it. Presumption, advantage, okay. Next is interest. Interest is very interesting. It says that if there is any shall be payable when a person fails to pay tax. Okay, you don't file your returns on time. For the delayed payment, you have to pay interest at the rate of 18%. ऐसा नहीं होता तो फिर लोग हमेशा लेट फाइल करते हैं ना, तो इसीलिए देयर इज अ प्रोविजन व्हिच सेज दैट इफ यू फाइल योर रिटर्न्स लेट, सेक्शन 50 सबसेक्शन 1 says you have to pay interest at the rate of 18%. Section 50 subsection 2 says that interest shall be calculated from the day succeeding the day, and there is a new provision which is inserted under section 51. It says that your interest has to be paid only on the net cash liability, not on the gross liability. आपका टैक्स सेल्स के ऊपर 1 लाख है, आपका क्रेडिट 30,000 है, तो आपको इंटरेस्ट 1 लाख पे करना है या 1 लाख माइनस 30,000. दैट इज व्हाट दिस प्रोविजन इज क्लैरिफाइंग, दैट आपको इंटरेस्ट 1 लाख पे नहीं पे करना है, 1 लाख माइनस 30,000, बिकॉज 30,000 विल कम इन योर क्रेडिट, right? So 1 lakh minus 30,000, which is 70,000, you have to pay interest on this 70,000. That is called as net liability. Okay. Gross liability is that 1 lakh, which is your total sales. On the total sales, you don't have to pay interest. You have to pay interest on your gross liability minus the credit. On the net liability, you have to pay interest. And interest shall be payable in case where the taxable person makes an undue or excess claim of input tax credit. आपने extra credit ले लिया है, or you have taken wrong credit, then you shall pay interest at the rate of 18%. Output नहीं पे किया, late पे किया, तब भी 18%, इनपुट टैक्स क्रेडिट एक्सेस ले लिया तब भी 18%. Now, gross liability and net liability will be what? Sales for the month of, this month is 15 lakhs, and I have made purchases of 10 lakhs. So what is my gross liability and net liability? Zero. Because these are my sales values. On sales, you will not decide the gross liability and net liability. What is the tax payable? The tax payable will decide your gross liability and net liability. Just the sale value and purchase value will not decide. So we have to ask the supplier, RCR, the taxpayer, Baba, आप sales मत दीजिए, मुझे tax liability दीजिए. So on the 15 lakhs, they're saying my output tax is 2,70,000 and my input tax is 1,67,000. Okay. Then what is the gross liability now? Gross liability is 2,70,000 and net liability is 2,70,000 minus 1,67,000, which is 1,03,000. This is my net liability. So interest is payable on 2,70,000 or 1,03,000. It is payable on 1,03,000. So that is what I want to explain you. That tax is not payable just on your output tax. From your output tax, whatever is your input tax, you will reduce that. And the net is called as your net liability on which you pay the interest. Now, there is a proviso added to 51, which I said that uh, it says that interest on tax payable in respect of supply made during a tax period and declared in the return for the said period, furnished after the due date in accordance with the provisions of Section 39, except when such return is furnished after commencement of 73 or 74, shall be payable on that portion of tax that is paid by debiting the electronic cash ledger. Okay, so little complicated. Let's understand this with an example. Now, payment of tax for the month of April 2019, the due date we know is 20th May. Now, let's take this scenarios. Case one is payment and filing I've done on 18th May. My gross output tax is 10 lakhs and ITC is 7 lakhs. So, I should pay interest on what value? I will not wait for your answers. So I will give you the answer here. Interest, no interest will be payable. Hurry. Why? 10 lakhs is there and 7 lakhs. So 10 minus 7, I should pay on 3 lakhs. I have to pay, provided I file my returns rate. 20th is my due date. I have made the payment on 18th. I have made the payment in advance. So no interest payable. Correct? Second scenario, payment and filing is done on 28th August. So due date was 20th May. I have filed it on 28th August. Now there is a delay. Same output tax of 10 lakhs, input of 7 lakhs. I should pay interest on what value? I have to pay interest on 10 minus 7, 3 lakhs at the rate of 18% for 100 days. Why 100 days? 20th May say 28th August is 100 days. So I have to pay interest for that 100 days. Okay. That is from 21st May to 28th August. That comes to 100 days. I have to pay interest on not on 10 lakhs, on 3 lakhs. Fine. 88B says that tax paid by debiting the electronic cash ledger, tax of amount remains unpaid. This again, I will teach you through an example. This is saying that same example, April 2019 ka due date is 20th May. April month's returns and supplies when it is made. April ka hi supply I have declared in the month of April. What value? 10,000 value. Have April ka due date is on May. I have filed it on 1st June. How did I pay this 10,000 rupees? Through my electronic credit ledger 6,000 rupees. Through my electronic cash ledger 4,000 rupees. So interest has to be calculated on what value? Should it be calculated on 10,000? Should it be calculated on 6,000? Or should it be calculated on 4,000? The gross is 10,000 rupees. I will reduce electronic credit ledger and the net is 4,000 rupees. So I can say that 4,000 के ऊपर मुझे interest लगेगा. Correct? Because interest is payable on the net liability and here the net liability is 10 minus 6, 4,000 rupees. Second example, I am filing a return of April, right? But the sales of March, I did not declare in March and I'm declaring it in April. Okay. In first scenario, April sales I have declared in April month correctly. Now, March month, some sales of 15,000 rupees I've forgotten to declare in March. I am declaring it in the month of April. Okay. And this April month's return I'm filing late. Now the liability was 15,000 rupees. I've utilized credit ledger 10,000 rupees, cash ledger 5,000 rupees. Interest will be payable on what? Gross or net? 15,000 minus 10,000, 5,000. But it will be on 15,000 because March month's ka return ka data I have included in April. So I have to pay on gross and not on net. If this month's sale I declared in my this month's return, in the same month's return, then I will get the benefit of paying interest on the net liability. But if the sales of previous years I'm declaring it in this month, or sales of previous month, or any month prior to this month, which I am declaring in current month, then I will not get the benefit of this net liability. I have to pay it on the gross liability. This is what Rule 88B1 and 88B2 is saying. Okay, you can take a picture and you can read the provisions. You will absorb it faster. Okay, ITC availed but not utilized. No interest is payable because you have availed it and not utilized it. But if you have availed and utilized, interest shall be payable from the date of utilization. ओके अवेलिंग इज गेटिंग द अमाउंट इन योर क्रेडिट लेजर जस्ट आपके क्रेडिट लेजर में पड़ा है तो आपको इंटरेस्ट पे करने की जरूरत नहीं है जब क्रेडिट लेजर से कम होता है टुवर्ड्स योर लायबिलिटी व्हेन द क्रेडिट लेजर गेट्स यूटिलाइज्ड फॉर पेमेंट ऑफ योर लायबिलिटी then interest will trigger not otherwise so interest liability starts from the date of utilization and not from the date of availing of credit okay. So that is all on the topic of payment under taxes. Now we'll take a break of 5 minutes since most of you are there with me for continuous close to more than an hour. We'll take a break of just 5 minutes. 7:25 will assemble and discuss the topic of TDS, TCS and returns. Can we get started? So the next topic for discussion is TDS and TCS. Very simple topic, but we have to understand, then it becomes simpler. I'll give you a cake. Okay. Let's understand what I'll give it to you. But while giving this cake to you, when you came, you ordered, I showed you this cake. When you came to take the delivery of this cake, I gave you this. I ate one bite of it and I gave you balance. You asked me, why did you eat? This is TDS. That is tax deducted at source. Uh, exactly like how that cake fully you've ordered, but I've given you after eating that one piece. It is your cake only which I'm eating and I'm collecting full amount. It's not like I'm collecting half of the amount. Full amount I will collect and I'll give you part of it. This is TDS. That is tax deducted at source for the amount what I pay. You made a sales of 1 lakh to me. I have to make payment of 1 lakh, but I've deducted some portion. Whatever is the portion, I've deducted that and I've given to you. And I'm saying that that portion will come to your electronic cash ledger. Why? Because the government wants to know who is the person who's supplying, whether he's filing the returns correctly. He's supplied to me. Fine. Whether the GST is paid to the government correctly or no, I want to track it. That's why I've got this TDS mechanism. So from the payment, what I have to make, I withhold something that is called TDS. Okay. Now, you came, second scenario, you ordered the cake. I'll say, okay, take this cake and I'll give you one pastry also. In TDS, I took away something. In TCS, I'll give you something more. Okay. For this is not free. Don't be very happy that, okay, cake के साथ एक pastry free मिल रहा है. I'm not giving you this pastry for free. If you want this cake, you take the cake. You have already paid me the money. Now you have to pay me the money for pastry also. Only then I'll give you this. ये तो जबरदस्ती हो गया. Yes. TCS is when you have ordered for something, okay, and I've told you have to pay me 1 lakh for this. You have paid 1 lakh. You have to pay extra more. That is called TCS. Okay. TDS is tax deduction and TCS is opposite that it's a tax collection. That is the person who is selling, he will collect some extra money from you. That is called as TCS. ठीक है. Cakes का example आपको समझ में आ गया. In first, there's something is got deducted, and in second, something is getting added for extra consideration. This is called as tax collected at source. Okay. Exactly this example. 1 lakh rupees is the invoice. Payment to the government as TDS is 10,000 rupees and payment to the vendor is 90,000 rupees. ये 10,000 आपका लॉस नहीं है. ये 10,000 आपको मिल जाएगा in your electronic cash ledger. Okay, theoretical things. When is tax deducted? TDS refers to tax deducted when recipient of goods makes payments to the supply and reflected in your electronic cash ledger. TCS is under GST is collected under section 52. TCS refers to tax which is collected by e-commerce operator. TDS is when you supply to the government entities and TCS is when you supply to e-commerce operators. Okay. Both are reflected in your electronic cash ledger itself. Now TDS. First we'll discuss TDS. When there is a department, when you supply to one of these people, that is when you are supplying it to a department or an establishment of the government, of the central government or state government. That is, you are making a supply to a department, that is central government department or state government department or an establishment of the central government or state government, or you're supplying to a local authority, you're supplying it to a government agency or any other person or category of persons which the government is notifying. अगर आप मोस्टली गवर्नमेंट को ही है कि आप जब गवर्नमेंट एंटिटीज सेंट्रल गवर्नमेंट या स्टेट गवर्नमेंट को कंस्ट्रक्शन एक्टिविटीज करते हो, रोड कंस्ट्रक्शन करते हो, इंफ्रास्ट्रक्चर डेवलपमेंट करते हो, so many activities government takes services from private entities. They give tenders, they give orders, so many things they do. When they give any of these things, right, and you are supplying it to the government authority, right? When the government authority को जब आप सप्लाई करते हो, then they are liable to deduct TDS. Okay, you don't have to deduct because you're supplying and you're charging GST. They will deduct TDS and give it to you. So primarily TDS is when you're making any supply to government entities, supplying goods or services both, because they've just said when you supply something to these entities. Authority or board or any body set up by an act of parliament, establishment of any government with 51% more participation of equity or control, society established by the central government or state government, public sector undertakings, or any registered person receiving supply of metal scrap. So these three are government entities. This new one they have added just 2 years back. Then when a registered person receiving supplies of metal scrap, तब भी TDS आ गया है. Okay. In these four situations, TDS is deducted, supplying it to an authority or board, which is set up by an act of parliament established by the government with 51% or more participation, supplying it to a society established by the central government, public sector undertakings, or a registered person receiving supplies of metal scrap. In these four cases, TDS is applicable. TDS provisions are applicable only to certain prescribed authority of Ministry of Defense. Remaining authorities under the Ministry of Defense are exempted. So that's a clarification. And category of persons not liable to deduct when supplies are supplied from a public sector undertaking to another public sector. And private to government, TDS applicable. From one public sector undertaking to another public sector undertaking, TDS not deductible. And also, where supply of goods takes place between one person to another person specified in clause A, B, C, D of 51, except the person referred in D. Okay. So within these things, जो हमने चार कैटेगरीज कहा है ना, उनके बीच में अगर कुछ सप्लाई होता है, तब भी TDS applicable नहीं है. ऑन व्हाट वैल्यू टीडीएस इज डिडक्टेबल की मैंने 50,000 का सप्लाई किया, टीडीएस लगेगा नहीं लगेगा, बिकॉज देयर इज अ थ्रेशोल्ड, द वैल्यू ऑफ सप्लाई or the value of the contract should exceed 2,50,000 rupees. If the value of the contract is below 2,50,000, then TDS is not deductible. If it is more than 2,50,000, then only TDS is deductible. At what rate? TDS is deductible at the rate of 1%. Just 1% के ऊपर TDS लगेगा, सभी के ऊपर नहीं. So the tax would be deducted at 1%, which makes it as effectively 2%, 1% CGST, 1% SGST. Okay. So if you made supply of 1 lakh rupees, they will deduct TDS at 2% on it. Okay. And in case of interstate, 1 plus 1, 2 हो गया, जैसे 9 plus 9 percentage makes it 18%, and 18% in case of IGST, वैसे ही 1% TC, 1% CGST, 1% SGST, and in case of interstate, 2% will be deductible. No TDS is deductible when where the location of supplier and place of supply are in same state, but place of recipient of supply is another state. This is very important. Make a note of this. Record this 100 times. Keep this in your mind. कि कब TDS deduct करना पड़ेगा, कब TCS, DDS deduct नहीं करना पड़ेगा. Where the location of the supplier and place of supply both are in the same state. Okay, but the place of recipient of the supply is in another state. क्योंकि recipient अगर दूसरे state में है, तो आप TDS deduct नहीं कर सकते हो. Okay, location of supplier, place of supply, and recipient are in the same state. So in this scenario, will you deduct TDS? Yes, TDS will be deductible because location of supplier, place of supply, and recipient are in the same state. Second, location of supplier and place of supply are in two different states. Then TDS is deductible. TDS is deductible because location of supplier and place of supply are in different states, but place of the recipient is not defined here. So TDS is still deductible. In third scenario, location of supplier and place of supply are in the same state, but recipient is in a different state. Will you deduct it? No, you will not deduct it because recipient should be in the same state. Which state? Recipient should be in the state either of the location of the supplier or in the place of supply. Okay. Generally, when we decide the uh, place of supply, two factors we consider: location of supplier and place of supply. If these two are in the same state, then you treat it as intrastate. When these two are in different state, we treat it as an interstate. But in the case of TDS, you have to consider three factors: location of the supplier, place of supply, and the recipient of the supply. If recipient of the supply is matching with one of these things, then TDS is deductible. But if the location of the recipient is different from these two, then TDS is not deductible. This is very, very relevant and important. Because if these facts are given and the facts mention that recipient is in the same state, only then you will deduct, not otherwise. Okay. Now proceeding further, location of supplier is state A, place of supply is state A, recipient is in state A. So this person, recipient is the factor for us. Recipient is in the same state, so TDS is deductible. Now, second scenario, location A, place of supply A, recipient is in place B, he is in a different state, TDS is not deductible. Location, state A in one state, place of supply in another state, recipient is another state. So recipient is in one of these states. So TDS is deductible because recipient can be either in the state of the location of supplier or in the state of place of supply. In this case, it is in the place of supply. So TDS is deductible. Fourth scenario, Union Territory 1, Union Territory 1, Union Territory 1. All the three are in the same Union Territory. TDS is deductible. Second scenario, Union Territory 1 is the location of supplier. Union Territory 2 is the place of supply, and recipient is in second Union Territory. TDS is deductible. Third scenario, Union Territory 1, place of supply also is in Union Territory 1, but the recipient is in a different state, then TDS is not deductible. Okay. Take this example, Kolkata, location of supplier, place of supply Kolkata, place of recipient Kolkata. What is the nature of GST? Location of supply and place of supply, CGST and SGST. Correct? TDS applicable? Yes. How much is the TDS? 1 and 1. Location of supply Kolkata, place of supply Jharkhand, place of recipient Kolkata. It matches with one of these two. So TDS is definitely applicable. But location of supplier and place of supply are in two different states. So IGST will be charged. So TDS will be 2%, not 1 plus 1. 2% of IGST will be the TDS deduction. Kolkata is the location of supplier, place of supply is Kolkata, place of recipient is in another state. TDS is not applicable, but the nature of supply is of a intra-state supply because location of supplier and place of supply both are in same state. Okay. What happens after deduction? Deposit the tax. The government will deposit the tax to the government account by the 10th. They will issue a certificate in form GSTR 7A. And if not deducted on time, then they are liable to pay interest, and amount of TDS will reflect in my electronic cash ledger. A registration, a person required to TDS shall submit an application on common portal. Refund can be claimed of excess TDS deduct because excess TDS is like excess money in my bank account that I can claim as a refund if I need. Okay, that is on TDS. Let's move to TCS. TCS is simple when I make supply through e-commerce. Now, what is an e-commerce? First of all, e-commerce means any supply of goods, supply of services, or supply of goods and services, including digital products over digital network or electronic network. When somebody supplies, this transaction is called electronic commerce transaction. And who is the electronic commerce operator? Electronic commerce operator means any person who owns or who operates or who manages this digital or electronic facility. जैसे अभी कुछ ऐप पे कुछ बेचते हैं, so who is the owner of the app? That owner is called as an electronic commerce operator. जब Amazon कुछ फाइंड आउट करती है, आइडेंटिफाई करती है सब सेलर और बायर, राइट? तो Amazon is a electronic commerce operator. that anybody who owns or operates that digital media, the electronic facility or that platform for e-commerce, that person is called as a electronic commerce operator. Types of supply is now e-commerce online को हम mix नहीं करेंगे. That's why what type of supply can happen when I supply goods through e-commerce operator, then it is subject to TCS. If I supply of services through e-commerce operator, then if it is notified services, very careful because हर इलेक्ट्रॉनिक कॉमर्स ऑपरेटर के ट्रांजैक्शन पे टीसीएस नहीं लगेगा. फॉर गुड्स डेफिनेटली सभी गुड्स पे लगेगा. But for services, if it is notified services, then e-commerce operator has to pay GST. ठीक है. Since e-commerce operator pays the GST, उसको फिर से TCS कलेक्ट करने की जरूरत नहीं. जैसे उबर पे आप चलाते हो, कार यूज करते हो. इज इट सप्लाई ऑफ गुड्स और सर्विसेज? डेफिनेटली आपको पूरी कार नहीं लेनी है, सिर्फ रेंटल लेनी है. यू आर यूटिलाइजिंग द फैसिलिटी विच मीन्स इट्स अ सर्विस. तो उबर में सर्विसेज हो गया, तो हम सर्विसेज में आ जाएंगे. नाउ उबर का सर्विस नोटिफाइड सर्विस है, नोटिफाइड अंडर सेक्शन 95 की 5 चीजें ऐसे ही है जो नोटिफाइड है. ऑन दैट सप्लाई ई कॉमर्स ही टैक्स पे करेगा. सो जब आप उबर पे सवार करते हो, ड्राइवर को पूछे क्या आप टैक्स पे करते हो भैया, क्या आप जीएसटी पे करते हो, वो तो कहता मैं तो नहीं करता हूँ. सबको पता है कि थोड़े सेक्टर्स ऐसे हैं जो जीएसटी पे नहीं करेंगे. लाइक there are some sectors which will not pay GST, but they operate through an e-commerce operator. So they've got this e-commerce fellow saying that, boss, come here. You are having all the database of these unorganized people. So you are anyways collecting money from the customer. So when you're collecting money from the customers, collect the taxes also. So this e-commerce operator will pay taxes of GST on that Uber charges. तो ड्राइवर पे नहीं कर रहा है, इसका मतलब ऐसा नहीं कि हम जीएसटी पे नहीं कर रहे हैं. हम जीएसटी पे करते हैं इन दैट ई कॉमर्स ऑपरेटर ऐप में ही. आप देखिए, आपका इनवॉइस देखेंगे तो फिर से टीसीएस कलेक्ट करने की जरूरत नहीं. द ऑब्जेक्टिव ऑफ टीसीएस एंड टीडीएस एंड टीसीएस इज the taxes should go to the government, and in this case of notified services, taxes already gone to the government, so here TCS is not applicable. Other than notified services, other than this 5 notified services, on that transactions TCS will be collected. Now what is this notified services? Services of transportation of passengers by radio taxi, motor cab, maxi cab, or any other motor vehicle except omnibus, which is Ola and Uber. Service by way of transportation of commerce by omnibus except where the person supplying such service through e-commerce is the company. जब बस आप लेते हो e-commerce operator से, तब also GST, it will be TCS, e-commerce operator will pay the taxes. Services by way of payment, accommodation, hotels in Make My Trip, Airbnb, ऐसे सब आप होटल वगैरह बुक करते हो, तब मेक माई ट्रिप ही टैक्स पे करेगा. सर्विसेज बाय वे ऑफ हाउसकीपिंग सर्विसेज, प्लम्बिंग, कारपेंटरिंग. अर्बन क्लैप वगैरह ऐप है ना, वो क्या सर्विस करते हैं, प्लम्बिंग कारपेंटरिंग वगैरह करते हैं, तब अर्बन क्लैप ही टैक्स पे करेगा, वो कारपेंटर और प्लम्बर पे नहीं करेगा. एंड सप्लाई ऑफ रेस्टोरेंट सर्विसेज, जोमेटो, टोमेटो, उबर, जोमेटो, उबर ईट्स है, और क्या है नया वाला वो स्विगी. इन सब पे जब आप खाना बुक करते हो, तब वो स्विगी जोमेटो वाला ही टैक्स पे करता है. तो सिर्फ 5 कैटेगरी है जहां पे टैक्सेस ई कॉमर्स ऑपरेटर पे करता है. इनके अलावा बाकी जो भी सर्विसेज आप सर्विसेज लेते हो ई कॉमर्स ऑपरेटर पे, देन उसके ऊपर टीसीएस लगेगा. ठीक है. नाउ if you're what are the various types of e-commerce? If you're selling your products through your own website, तो TCS नहीं है. If you bought out products through your own website, then TCS applicable नहीं है. But if you're buying through a e-commerce operator, that is आपके खुद के वेबसाइट पे आपको टीसीएस नहीं लगेगा. आप डायरेक्टली वेबसाइट से परचेज करते हो तब भी नहीं लगेगा. लेकिन ई कॉमर्स ऑपरेटर के, ई कॉमर्स ऑपरेटर कौन है? जो सप्लायर कुछ कोई और है और परचेजर कोई और है. ई कॉमर्स ऑपरेटर कुछ बेचता नहीं है, वो सिर्फ फैसिलिटेट करता है, तब टीसीएस लगेगा. एंड जब वो ऑपरेटर इन दोनों के बीच में एज अ इंटरमीडियरी एंड ही इज कनेक्टिंग द सेलर एंड बायर, then he is an e-commerce operator, then TCS provisions is applicable. And that operator, that is अगर मैं कुछ प्रोडक्ट्स Amazon पे बेचता हूं,
ठीक है। तो फिर मुझे और Amazon के बीच में ई कॉमर्स का रिलेशनशिप है, मुझे कस्टमर कौन है पता नहीं, कस्टमर ई कॉमर्स ऑपरेटर दे विल कम ऑन द Amazon वेबसाइट एंड प्लेस अ ऑर्डर फॉर माय प्रोडक्ट्स, राइट? इन दैट केस Amazon is an e-commerce. Similar to Amazon, there are various multiple e-commerce operators. Amazon is most popularly used, so I'm using it. I'm not canvassing any company here. I'm just using it for an example. So when a buyer comes and places his order in e-commerce, like an Amazon, they will give me the details and I will fulfill that order. So whatever sales I made, say I made a sale of 1,000 rupees, customer will pay the 1,000 plus GST because here the liability of GST is on me only, correct? Not on e-commerce operator. So I will charge 1,000 plus 500 rupees of, no, 1,000 के ऊपर 50 rupees of GST. So 1,050 I will charge to the customer. Customer will not make payment to me because he will make the payment to this e-commerce operator. Now this e-commerce operator, while paying this amount to me, because 1,050 belongs to me, they have to pay me, right? But they will deduct their commission charges and they will deduct some amount called as tax collected at source and pay me the rest. So instead of me paying them, they will tell, okay, you don't pay me, I have to pay you 1,050 rupees. I will deduct this TCS and give it to you. Otherwise, I have to pay them again and then they will pay me. So instead of two transactions, they will collect some amount from me, right, indirectly, and pay it on the GST portal. I will get that in my electronic cash ledger when I see my returns. Okay. This is the concept of TCS by a e-commerce operator. What is the rate of TCS? It is 0.25. Earlier it was 0.5%. Now they have brought it down to 0.25%, which means 0.25 plus 0.25% in case of a CGST and SGST transaction. And in case of IGST transaction, it will be 0.5%. On what value? On aggregate value of taxable supplies minus the tax supplies returned to the supplier, because lot of supplies I make and there are returns. So you have to reduce the returns on the net value of taxable supplies. TCS is collected. So TCS, we put it in a nutshell. Person who is liable to collect tax at source, e-commerce operator. Is there any threshold limit? No threshold limit. What is the rate of collection? CGST and SGST both put together 0.5%. On what value? On net value. When should they make the payment to the government? Within 10 days from the end of the month. Okay. Say there is a seller who's selling goods on Flipkart. He's a seller. He is charging 1,000 rupees. Say the GST rate is 12%. So he's charging 1,000 plus 120. Okay, on Amazon. This is an e-commerce operator. And Rohit Sharma is a buyer. He buys for 1,120. So here Amazon will collect 1,120. They will reduce their commission charges and they will reduce the TCS and pay the balance to me. That is how it happens. Okay, these are all problems. I think I've given the answer. I will share the presentation on the calculation aspect. Okay, now we can quickly move to the next topic, which is on returns. Returns is simple, right? We know what is a return, but how to file the return, what is the information, that is what we will discuss here. Okay, let's start discussion on the returns. What is a return? Basically, whatever transactions you're doing, that information you're passing on to the government. Because otherwise, government does not know what you're doing, right? We are just doing sale and purchase, and I'm paying the taxes correctly. Okay, you're paying, but how does the government know, right? So to get to know what is happening, because we are under the self-assessment regime, that is, you have to do your own assessment. Now, if you have to do your own assessment, somewhere you have to report it. ऐसा नहीं कि self-assessment means you should not report it. You will do a self-assessment, then you will report it to the government. That reporting happens through this monthly returns. So returns are information which taxpayers gives to the government for whatever transactions is taken place in a monthly basis. If you're filing monthly returns, or on a quarterly basis if you're filing quarterly returns, and if you're filing a composition taxpayer on an annual basis. Okay, different types of return for different categories: regular taxpayer, CPP, NRTP, composition taxpayer, UIN holders. Separate returns are there. Returns will provide facts. It has a specified format, and the purpose is mode of transfer of information, compliance verification, and finalization of the tax liabilities, providing necessary inputs to the government to take any policy decisions, management of audit, and of course to claim the credit by the recipient. What are the types of returns we file? We file the following types of return: furnishing of details of my outward supply. Okay, so I will file my outward supplies in this return called GSTR1. Okay, I will file my outward supplies. Here, I'm not filing actually a return. I'm just filing my outward supplies. Why? Because from my outward supply, my recipient can claim the credit. So whatever I'm filing in my GSTR1, that details will get reflected for the recipient as GSTR2A and GSTR2B. Okay, it will reflect as a input for him in GSTR 2A or 2B. On that basis, the recipient can claim the credit. So first, I will furnish the details of my outward supply. There are two due dates for this: 11th and 13th. When we come to GSTR1, you'll get to know for whom it is 11th and for whom it is 13th. Okay, so GSTR1 is the details of my outward supply. Then details, once I file my details of outward supply, then I have to file the details of my taxes or the final return. This is called the return under section 39, which is through GSTR 3B. For normal taxpayer, you have to file return in GSTR 3B. Okay. And for a composition taxpayer, that return is called GSTR 4, and GSTR 3B is a monthly or a quarterly return, optional thing. But GSTR 4 is a annual return. A composition taxpayer will file GSTR 4 on an annual basis, and GSTR 5 is filed by a non-resident taxable person. Okay. Then there are other returns, which is called as first return. The TCS returns called as statement of TCS in GSTR 8, and annual return is filed in GSTR 9, 9A, 9B, and depends on the person. A normal taxpayer will file 9, or 9A will be filed by a composition taxpayer, and 9B by a different category of people. And once you have filed all the returns and you have gone for, and now you want to go for cancellation. So once you apply for cancellation, your cancellation will get approved, but subject to one final return called as GSTR 10. So whatever liabilities are due, you have to file it in it. So that will be called as final return. And a UIN holder, a unique identification number holder, he will file a return in a form called GSTR 11. Okay. The best part of all this is that all the returns are to be filed electronically. There is no question of any manual filing. All the returns will be filed electronically on the GST portal. Okay. Why important it is to file the returns on time? Firstly, you will save interest. You don't have to pay interest if you file your returns on time. If you pay your returns late, only then you have to pay your interest and penalty and all. And taxpayer is required to estimate his tax liability on self-assessment basis and deposit this tax. That's why it is important to file the return on time. One more reason why you have to file the returns on time is if I file my returns on time, then the recipient will get the credit on time. Otherwise, your customer, if he's a B2B customer, if he's a registered taxable person, then he'll come and scold you, what I bought goods from you, but whatever GST you have collected from me is not appearing in my electronic credit ledger, because he wants the credit, right? He wants to reduce his burden of output tax liability. That's why he will tell that please pay the taxes and file the returns on a timely basis, because if you delay your returns, then my credit also gets delayed, right? If I made a sale to him this month and if I reflect it in my this month's return, then in this month's credit ledger, in his returns, he can claim the credit. But if this month's return, if I've not filed it on time, the credit and I filed it late, it will appear in his credit ledger in the next month. Because which month I file up to the 20th, that is the due date. If I file it at the 11th, what I'm saying, if I file it on time, it will reflect to him. If I file after 11th, then it will reflect to him in the next month, because it cannot be dynamic. One cutoff date is there, that 11th and 13th. If I file within the due dates, it will reflect it. If I file it late, it will reflect in the next month's returns. How do you file the returns? You can file directly on the portal, which is called as gst.gov.in. Upload, either mention the details on the GST portal, or you can upload it through offline utilities, that is Excel utilities, which is given by the GSTIN. If you have hundreds of transactions, you can put it in a utility. If you have lakhs of transactions, you cannot enter it in a utility also, because manually feeding, copy paste takes so much of time, and filing monthly returns is a monthly affair. So you have GST Suvidha providers wherein they integrate your systems with GST portal. Okay. Take an example of Reliance. Reliance Telecommunication has Geo, has so many customers, right? If they have so many prepaid customers, it's fine. But postpaid customers, monthly, they have to raise invoice with GST. Now, can they put all these details manually in Excel? Not possible. So their system will get integrated and the information will go through this GST Suvidha provider called as GSP. He will integrate GST with your accounting or ERP system, and it will be integrated, and you say approve, then your information will go to the GST portal. So GSPs help in allowing the integration of your system with the GST portal. Okay. Then GSPs develop application for return filing, reconciliation with auto-populated data support. This is what GST Suvidha providers will do. Okay. Information furnished in the returns are stored on the common portal, and it will be same for center and state. Okay. CGST, ST के लिए separate returns file करने की जरूरत नहीं है. जैसे in one challan you can pay CGST, SGST and IGST. Similarly, in your returns also you can mention whatever CGST, IGST and SGST transactions on the portal in one return itself. Okay, first is GSTR1, which is the statement of your outward supplies. Here, what do you have? Here, you will furnish all your outward supply. Okay, and the due date of filing is by the 10th of the subsequent month. But the government has given the power to the commissioner to extend it. So in the act, the date is 10th, but by notification, the commissioner has given a relaxation wherein he said that it can be filed by the 11th if your turnover is more than 5 crores, and it can be filed by the 13th from the end of the quarter, which is monthly filers has to file by 11th, and quarterly filers can file by the 13th of the end of the quarter, because of course monthly you will not file, because you have to file it on a quarterly basis. Monthly filers 10th, monthly filers 11th, 10th in the act, extended by commissioner to 11th. So monthly filers by 11th. So today is the due date for filing GSTR1 for which month? for the month of June. So a lot of people in my office have finished filing and few have not given the data, so we'll file them late. So June month's due date for filing GSTR1 is the 11th of July. So today is the due date for monthly filers of June. Okay. Now, 11th, 13th is the due date for filing quarterly returns. So April, May, June, the quarterly data returns has to be filed by the 13th of this month. So they have time till today is 11th, 12th, 13th. By Monday, the people who are opted for quarterly returns, that is, if their turnover is below 5 crores, they can opt for this quarterly returns monthly payment option. They will opt for it and file the returns on a quarterly basis. This is only GSTR1. Now, GSTR1 has to be filed by whom? By everybody, including a casual taxable person, except the following: a ISD person, input service distributor, he will not file GSTR1. NRTP, he will also not file it. Composition taxpayers, persons paying TDS, e-commerce operating, collecting TCS, and supply of OIDR. OIDR is Online Information Database Access and Retrieval Services. Just understand this because it's not there for your syllabus now, it is there in your finals. So OIDAR people also need not file GSTR1. Okay. So what is the due date? As I said, registered person opting for QRMP scheme, 13th of the subsequent quarter, and the regular monthly filers, they have to file by the 11th. Now, this QRMP scheme person, okay, they are filing quarterly returns. That is, their turnover is below 5 crores. Government is given a facility and it's a choice given to them, not a compulsory thing that they have to file quarterly. If they are comfortable with monthly, please file monthly returns. But if you want to file quarterly, then monthly, what you will do, you will make sales. Now, if I make sales and if I file my returns in the third month, customer will get the credit in third month, but he's bought it in 1 month. So he will tell, if I buy from you, I cannot get the credit. So I will not buy from you. So the government came in and said, okay, people who are under this QRMP scheme for the first 2 months, whatever supplies you are making, you can upload those supplies in this invoice furnishing facility because I'm not opening GSTR1 for you now. You will upload the GSTR1 in the third month because end of the quarter, 13th day of the end of the quarter, you have to file GSTR1. So for the supplies what you have made and the customer wants the credit, you file this invoicing furnishing facility, which is called as IFF. Once you file this IFF, it will get reflected in your GSTR2 and 2A of the customer. They will claim the credit. So it's like a stop gap saying that आप GSTR1 क्वार्टर एंड में फाइल करोगे उसके पहले आप IFF फाइल कर दीजिए. IFF is इनवॉइस फर्निशिंग फैसिलिटी. जैसे आप GSTR1 फाइल करते हो वैसे ही IFF रहेगा. दैट क्वार्टर ऑन अ मंथली बेसिस व्हाट यू आर डूइंग ऑन अ क्वार्टरली बेसिस, मंथली जो भी आपने सेल किया है और कस्टमर B2B होना चाहिए क्योंकि उसको क्रेडिट चाहिए. सो यू कैन फाइल अ इनवॉइस फर्निशिंग फैसिलिटी अगेन बाय द 13th of the subsequent month. एंड अपलोड वॉट एवर डिटेल्स यू अपलोडेड, आपको फिर से GSTR1 में डालने की जरूरत नहीं है. सो वॉट एवर यू अपलोडेड हियर विल गेट रिफ्लेक्टेड इन योर GSTR1. Upload in IFF for 1 month and 2. Yes, you have uploaded. Then upload month 3 invoices in GSTR1. ठीक है. So month 1, month 2, month 3, 3 separate months. Month 1 and 2 का details I uploaded in IFF. Then month 3 का transactions only I will report in my GSTR1 and it will get filed. If I have not uploaded IFF for those two customers or for those 2 months, then I have to upload all those details in my quarterly returns. Simple. जो furnish कर दिया है, जो details दे दिया है, there is no need to repeat it again in the quarterly returns. अगर नहीं दिया है तो इंक्लूड करना है. क्लियर? ठीक है. Once you do that, then the details of your outward supplies gets reflected. Now you have to mention HSN in your GSTR1. Up to how many digits? Up to 5 crores if your turnover is there, you can disclose 4 digits. That too for B2B. B2C, it is option. But if your turnover crosses 5 crores, for all your supplies, you have to report up to 6 digits. What is a HSN? Harmonized system of nomenclature, which is coming from your customs classification. Customs classification has 8 digits. But your government has relaxed it. They're saying that up to 5 crores, if you're having a turnover, you just give 4 digits of your HSN. Above 5 crores, you give 6 digits of your HSN code. Why? Because government needs to know what is the supplies you're making, what is the classification you're making. Because HSN is a mandatory requirement to be mentioned in the invoice and to be mentioned in the returns. When is a registered person debarred? Matlab, some cases you cannot file a GSTR1 when if he has not furnished the return in GSTR3B for the preceding month. Last month का आपने GSTR3B फाइल नहीं किया और आप just GSTR1111 फाइल कर रहे हो नहीं. One file करना is your outward supply. Payment happens through GSTR3B. So one file करके आपने GSTR3B फाइल नहीं किया है तो अगले मंथ का आप GSTR1 फाइल नहीं कर पाओगे. If you have filed one for this month, not filed GSTR3B for this month, next month one you will not be able to file. So you have to file GSTR1, file your 3B, only then your next month's GSTR1 will get opened up. A registered person opting for QRMP shall not be allowed to furnish the details of outward supply in GSTR1 if he has not furnished the return in form GSTR3B. So monthly return filers and quarterly return filers दोनों को GSTR1 file करना ही है. Then third category is a registered person to whom an intimation has been given in 88C. What is 88C? We'll come to that. That आपको एक intimation दिया गया है that your GSTR1 is more than your GSTR3B. Now, either you reply giving an explanation or pay the taxes. If you don't pay, then your return will be blocked. Similarly, GSTR, there is a rule, a notice which is given in 88B, wherein your GSTR2A is less and you have claimed more in your GSTR3B. Then also a notice will be given, give an explanation to them, or say, okay, I agree and pay the taxes. If you don't do one of these actions, then again your GSTR1 will be blocked. And when filing, taking registration, we said you have an option to give the bank account at that point of time, or you can give your bank account later on. If you're given at that point of time, well and good, but you decided that no, I will give it later on. But if you have a due date of GSTR1 and you have not given your bank details, your bank account number, bank and IFSC, if you have not given it, then your GSTR1 will be blocked. So in 5 cases, GSTR1 will be blocked. You have to give those details, only then you can file your GSTR1. Bank account details दे दीजिए, आपका GSTR1 खुल जाएगा. Simple. Fine. Can I file GST before the end of the month? No, but you can save it. But you can file it only after the end of the month. But in case of a casual taxable person, he closes business in between, cancellation of GST in between. In such cases, you can file the GSTR1 in between the month. Otherwise, in all the scenarios, you will have to file your GSTR1 at the end of the month itself. Before that, you cannot file it. If no business activity is carried on, still should I file GSTR1? Yes, nil return has to be filed. GSTR1, 3B, if you don't have any transactions, still you have to file a nil return. A person for opting for cancellation need to file for the active period. In case of conversion from normal taxpayer to composition taxpayer, for the period when you are a normal taxpayer, up till that period, you have to file GSTR1. What details you give? GSTN of the business, legal name, aggregate turnover of the previous year, what is your tax period, HSN-wise summary, documents issued, and details of advances received, taxable supplies made to registered person, interstate supplies to unregistered person, sales made to unregistered person, zero rated supplies, and nil rated supplies. The unregistered person you have to give only if your value is more than 2.5 lakhs and it is an interstate. Intrastate, you have to only give the total value. You don't have to give invoice wise breakup. Nil rated supply, debit note, credit notes issued, amendments in taxable value, amendments, anything, these things you have to give. So many details you have to give in your GSTR1. Invoice wise details, if it is a B2B supply, even if it is 1 rupee, you have to upload it because आपने supplier receiver अगर registered है, okay, if the receiver is registered, you have to give each invoice wise details. Okay, B2B supply you have to give. B2C supply, if it is interstate value more than 1 lakh, वहाँ पे 2.5 का actually it is amended, now it is 1 lakh rupees. If you're making any B2C, मतलब customer unregistered है, right? Then you have to give value invoice if the value is more than 1 lakh rupees. Otherwise, if it is less than 1 lakh, you can consolidate all of them. That is B. जैसे यहाँ पे, if you're making B2C, interstate supplies made to unregistered person less than 1 lakh, give rate of tax state wise you have to give. कि कौन से state को आपने supply किया है and for whom you're charging IGST that you have to give. And B2C intrastate supplies, you have no limit. हर invoice के लिए you will give a consolidated for B2C. Okay. So B2B, all invoices, and interstate more than 1 lakh invoice wise, and intrastate within the state 1 lakh, 10 lakh, 15 lakh, 20 lakh, you don't have to give invoice wise details. And B2C interstate less than 1 lakh, you can consolidate it. Okay. That is what is mentioned here again. Any amendments you're doing, yes, you can do it. You can report it in your previous month में आपने 1 lakh का invoice raise किया था, but you have entered it as wrongly 80,000 rupees. This month, you can give that invoice number and say, I am amending it. 80,000 को amend करके 1 lakh आप कर सकते हो. Till when you can amend it? Till 30th November, which is 22-23 के लिए by 30th November 2023, or the date of filing annual return, whichever is earlier. So most of the date, जैसे हम ITC का बोलते हैं ना, that how till when you can claim, same those dates are there till when you can rectify whatever mistakes you have done in your reporting details. Now, once I file GSTR1, I have observed some corrections I have to do. I made some mistakes. Can I do it? Yes. Before filing GSTR3B, you can file a GSTR1A. Earlier, this provision was not there. This is included just a year back. So you can expect some question from this also, that GSTR1A, should everybody file? I don't have transactions. Should I file nil returns? No. GSTR1, you have to file nil returns. GSTR1A is an optional return. If you don't have any amendments, you don't have to file nil returns. It's an optional return. But GSTR1A, like how you can file GSTR only once, GSTR1A also you can file only once. It allows to amend the records filed in your GSTR1, but it should be filed before filing the GSTR3B, because it will appear in your GSTR3B. Okay. At the recipient's end, the ITC for supplies declared or amended in GSTR1A will be available in the next tax period. So what is the use of GSTR1A? कि आपका GSTR3B करेक्ट हो, इसीलिए GSTR1 का जो भी अमेंडमेंट है आप GSTR1A में करके आप GSTR3B में इंक्लूड करेंगे. Okay, it can be amended only electronically through the common portal or by a facilitation center. There is no due date for GSTR1A. So technically, before filing GSTR3B, you can file the GSTR1A. 3B file करने के बाद आप GSTR1A नहीं file कर सकते हो, because the impact of GSTR1A is to appear in the 3B. So if you have filed GSTR3B, then you have thought, oh, I made a mistake. Can I file GSTR1A? No, you cannot do it. You have to do a rectification in the next month's account. Clear? In case there is a change required in GSTR number, that cannot be done in GSTR1A. Any corrections in the details, only that can be included in your GSTR1A. That is GSTR1A. Now coming to GSTR3B, you file GSTR1, make it amendment in GSTR1A, then claim a credit in your GSTR2A. The net impact will file in your GSTR3B return. Okay, 1 is your outward supplies, 2A is your input tax credit. दोनों को दिखाओगे आप, sales दिखाओगे, input tax दिखाओगे, and you will show the net liability. This return is called your GSTR3B return. Okay. This is your GSTR2B. Now, 88C and 88D. If you have filed your GSTR1, आंखें में दोनों length should be of the same size, right? But it is more than this, which means my outward supplies, what I've declared in GSTR1 and what GSTR3B I declare should be the same. but some people increase the supplies and pay less taxes. Correct? My sales was 1 crore. I should declare 1 crore in 3B, but I have declared 80 lakhs. Then what will happen? I paid liability on only 80 lakhs, not on 1 crore. So government will give a notice in Rule 88C, wherein they will inform that the differential amount of 20 lakhs, Baba, either pay it within 7 days or give me an explanation. Saying might be last month there was something, some corrections you have made. Do you have some reason, justifiable reason? Then you give that explanation within 7 days. Then the officer will examine and he will give it. Otherwise, he will tell, no, no, your explanation is not correct. You have to pay the differential tax. Okay. If you do not respond, then what will happen? As we discussed, your GSTR1 will be blocked and government will collect the taxes, assuming that whatever amounts you have declared in GSTR1, that is correct. 2A, 2B, okay, not required. Next is, oh, it's all mixed up. Return for regular taxpayers, that every registered person has to file this QRMP scheme, will file quarterly GSTR3B and others will file monthly GSTR3B return. Now, what is the due date for this? Monthly filers, which is 20th, and quarterly filers, again, you have due dates, that is 22nd and 24th. Why 22nd and 24th? They have distributed state-wise. You don't have to remember this, but this may be given to your exam that the due date is 22nd. That is, for monthly filers, it is always 20th, no state-wise bifurcation. But for quarterly return filers, they have to file GSTR 1 and 3B, right? So for them, 3B will be on 22nd if they are in A category states, that is states who have more turnover, and 24th for other category states. So they have split so that there is not much of a load on the GST portal. So GSTR 1 is 11th for monthly filers and 13th for quarterly filers. GSTR 3B is 20th for monthly filers and 22nd and 24th for quarterly filers. QRMP, as we said, optional, things like that. Then this is fine. QRMP is very simple. Revise return, can I file? Yes, I can file it. Revision of returns is possible. Composition taxpayer. A composition taxpayer, very simple. He will file annual return and make a quarterly payment. Very simplest. आपको monthly या quarterly की झंझट नहीं है. Whatever is your sales, on that you have to pay 1%. So you will make the payment on a quarterly basis, but you will file one annual return in GSTR 4 by the 30th June. So April to March का transactions, March के बाद भी आपको April, May, June, you're getting 3 months time. Sufficient calm return that you can file your returns after the end of the month, or you after the end of the year, not even month, not even quarter. After the end of the year, you get 3 months time to file your return in GSTR 4, but quarterly, because government cannot wait till end of the year to pay the taxes. So saying file the return on annual basis, but taxes तो पहले ही pay कर दो. So whatever is the sales for April, May, June, I have to pay it by the 18th of July. And July, August, September by the 18th of October. So हर quarter के end अगले month के 18th तक I have to pay the taxes. So quarterly statement of payment of taxes, I have to make the payment through CMP08. That is a simple payment challan. CMP08 say I will make payment of taxes, and returns I will file it through GSTR 4. Inward supplies are auto-populated, but no use because a composition taxpayer will not claim the credit, but he should see it so that a person from whom he's not bought anything, that person's data should not appear. So people who are filing their GSTR1, they will mention the details, but a composition taxpayer cannot claim the credit of it. Same, these are all details. You can just read this, what all details you will give. When a regular person moves from a regular scheme to composition scheme, can you go? Yes, I'm filing regularly. Now my turnover has come down. I can go for composition. Yes. When you're opting for composition scheme, you have to file the statements relating the period prior to composition. जैसे आपने you can go to the composition scheme only at the beginning of the year. Correct? So March तक आप regular scheme में थे. फिर on the 1st April you opted for composition. तो मार्च के ट्रांजैक्शंस जो भी है, correct, till March whatever is the transactions, you have to furnish the details. Okay, either till the due date of furnishing the return for the month of September or furnishing of annual return, whichever is earlier. तो रेगुलर से आप कॉम्पोजिशन स्कीम में चले गए, अब पुराने ट्रांजैक्शंस आप रिपोर्ट नहीं करोगे, नहीं, टिल कॉम्पोजिशन स्कीम था, टिल यू आर अंडर रेगुलर स्कीम, वंस यू मूव टू कॉम्पोजिशन स्कीम, तब तक के डेट का जो भी ट्रांजैक्शंस है, you have to furnish the return. You cannot escape it. Now you moved from composition to regular scheme. Then when you had existed, so you have to file this CMP-08 for the period prior to the exit by the 18th of the month succeeding the quarter in which the date of withdrawal falls. That is, आपका जो क्वार्टर फॉल होता है उसके 18 तक आपको CMP-08 फाइल करना पड़ेगा, and GSTR4 for the period prior to the exit, that is annual return. You have to make the payment through CMP-08, and because composition scheme वाला तो quarterly पे करेगा और annual फाइल करेगा, so by 30th June following the end of the financial year, he will have to file the annual return, one monthly return he has to file. So simply saying that when you're moving from one scheme to another scheme, whatever where the liabilities and whatever returns you have to file, that you will have to file. Clear? When you don't file your returns on time beyond 3 months, तो अप्रैल में जून दिया गया है, जुलाई अगस्त सितंबर तक आप फाइल कर दीजिए. अगर सितंबर तक भी आप फाइल नहीं करते हो, then you will get a cancellation of your registration. So composition taxpayer, they're only saying that we have given you 3 months, we'll give you extra 3 months, pay it with late filing fees, so you will save, otherwise we'll cancel your registration. The next is non-NRTP, a non-resident taxable person, that you will file a simplified return within 13 days from the end of the quarter or 7 days from the last date of your validity period. Your validity period is 90 plus 90 days. So monthly transactions by the 13th of the end of the quarter. And in the last quarter, last few months, which will be left over, last few days, for that 7 days from the last date of validity period, you have to file your returns. Then TDS, when it's to be filed, TDS, they have to file by the government before the 10th of the succeeding month in a return called GSTR7. Then return for the TCS, not much to explain, by the 10th. So TDS is 10th and TCS is also 10th because they're deducting and this people are collecting. They have to remit it to the government. So they will do it by the 10th. Okay. Then due date for payment of taxes, it is same like the return. There is no separate dates like filing of the return is separate, due date of payment is separate, both are same. The due date जब आप file करते हो returns, तब you will have to file, make the payment of taxes also. QRNP scheme, okay, there is that is fine. I think these are the major things to be discussed. Other things is GST practitioner, which is very theoretical. Then there is an extension of relaxation in terms of late filing fees, that is also understood. And then final return and annual return. Annual return is any person, all person except the following CTP, NRTP, they have to file an annual return in this form called GSTR 9 for a regular taxpayer and 9A for a composition taxpayer by the 31st of December every year. That is from April to March, whatever monthly returns you're filing, it's filed. By the 30th December, you have to file an annual return. And if your aggregate turnover is more than 5 crores, then you have to file another return called GSTR 9C. Okay. Normal taxable payer will file 9 and 9C. But if it is below 5 crores, they will file only GSTR 9. And every year there's a relaxation saying that if your turnover is up to 2 crores, then you don't have to file 9 also. So even for our relevant year, up to 2 crores, annual return is not required. So from 2 to no return, 2 to 5, GSTR 9, 9 and 9C. Okay, 2 returns has to be filed above 5 crore people. Who? A registered person whose registration is cancelled or surrendered. Okay, then he will have to file a final return within 3 months of the date of cancellation or date of order of cancellation, whichever is earlier. Okay, whichever is later. ठीक है? The person who has applied for cancellation and he's got the cancellation, then from the date of cancellation or date of that order of cancellation, whichever is later, उससे 3 months में he has to file an annual return that is called as GSTR 10. Okay, so that was majorly on the return. Of course, I have few MCQs. I will share this with you. We will not discuss it because I'm not able to listen to you. So I will share this with you. You can go through these MCQs and make your learning stronger. Okay, I hope it was a good learning. Of course, a master class because this is a revisionary classes. So we will focus on the topics, on the important topics. Of course, I have covered all the topics at a fast pace so that you can catch up on all the topics and you will revise this. That is the objective of this revisionary classes. Okay. Thank you very much for your patience, Yearning, and appreciate that you could tolerate me when you could not talk or you could not ask your questions. That is very, very appreciative. I hope this session was very helpful. Thank you very much. And through this, we are completing the portions on GST. All the very best for your exams. And I wish that you achieve good success, get good marks in the GST because GST is a scoring subject. And along with direct taxes, indirect taxes gets added up and gives you that added advantage. Focus on both the topics. GST will help you boost the total marks in this. A lot of practical questions will come up. Few theoretical questions is what I expect. Go through the details, and if there's any kinds of questions, I will see how we could reach out to me, but I will upload all the notes so that it will be available to you. Okay, thank you again, all the best. Yes, thanks.